Don't open the door. Don't try to hide.
Everybody's a suspect!
Not scared, are you? Scream.
Welcome back to the 12th annual Halloween special. Believe it or not, I have never done a singular review for Wes Craven's 1996 classic Scream. I reviewed this movie with my wife, I believe, during our very first Halloween special ever when I was still a small boy. And I've always wanted to do a more in-depth look at this film, and I was originally going to push it off to the 13th annual special next year. But tonight, I got to see Scream at the drive-in, which was a magical experience, and I highly recommend it if anybody lives near a drive-in theater. Try to do it at least a few times a year. They could use your support, and it really is a lot of fun. Tonight was a triple feature. They showed Wes Craven's 1984 classic A Nightmare on Elm Street, as well as the 2007 new classic Trick or Treat and Scream. With all of those great feels going on in my head, this is the perfect time for me to talk about this movie because next year I'm just going to rewatch it on Blu-ray or something, and it's just not going to have the same feels as just having seen it outside under the stars with a giant full moon over my head. So a year after the murder of her mother, a teenage girl is terrorized by a masked killer who targets her and her friends by using scary movies as part of a deadly game. It goes without saying that Scream revitalized the slasher genre in '96 when it debuted, and it also reminded people just how much of a legend Wes Craven was. But what does that actually mean, that it revitalized the slasher genre? I was only 8 years old when this movie came out, and of course I had heard about Halloween, I had heard about A Nightmare on Elm Street. I was very sheltered and wasn't allowed to watch those movies, but I knew of them. But they weren't my generation's slasher movies. They were movies that came before I was alive. And so the idea of every young kid that I was around suddenly referencing this movie called Scream, some of them really wanted to see it, some of them were allowed magically at 8, 9, 10 years old, and some weren't. But the fact was, kids were talking about a slasher movie, and it was new, and it was popular, and it had this aura to it. Like, I have to see that. If I can't now, maybe one day later or when it comes on TV. This film has one of the most brilliant openings of a horror film, period. And it's not just the script. The idea that a girl is getting a call and she answers all of these questions that are very meta relating to horror movies. It's the idea of casting Drew Barrymore in that role and putting her on your poster and not telling anyone that your supposed lead is going to die in the first 20 minutes of the film. This is beyond even what Psycho accomplished with Janet Leigh. This was people coming to a movie and thinking it was going to be about Drew Barrymore and getting thrown a curveball in the form of Ghostface's knife. Because when I rewatch movies like this that I love, and I've seen them many times, I start to try to think of them in script form, what it might have been like to have that script in your hands. The movie isn't made, Neve Campbell isn't cast, Wes Craven's not directing it, and you're just reading it. And experiencing those first 15 to 20 pages and thinking, okay, this is a good horror movie, but along the way, the idea to cast Drew Barrymore as that character changes the notion of all of it, because you could have easily cast a no-name actor in that role and the scene still would have been fine. But it wouldn't have had the shock value of saying, hey, this is Drew Barrymore in the mid-90s, and she's the star of your movie, except, whoops, she's not. And tonight at the drive-in, the cut that follows after Drew Barrymore's death that leads us into Neve Campbell's character gave me chills. It's one of my favorite edits in horror film, period. Just the idea of cutting away from Drew Barrymore at this very intense and loud moment, and without a fade, and without an establishing shot of where you are just instantly greeted with Neve Campbell's face. And we're told, actually, we're following her. As I continue to talk about Scream, I want to warn you this is going to contain spoilers. If you've never seen Scream, that's your warning. I'm going to talk about who the killer is and all of that stuff. So if you haven't seen it, go see the movie because it's amazing and you should really, really check that off your list if you haven't yet. Scream is many things. We have a lead character whose mother died a year ago. She potentially falsely testified against a man who maybe shouldn't be in jail. We've got a reporter writing a book about that. There's also murders happening right now with a guy dressed up in a ghost face mask. It's filled with meta movie in-jokes that have to relate to the plot and also poke fun at slasher movies. And at the same time, it's got to be everything a movie's supposed to be. Fast-paced, good characters, you have to care about what's going on, and it's got to be entertaining. And along with all of those things, Scream is also a whodunit. Because you got a bunch of suspects, someone's wearing a mask, and people are dying. And this movie is excellent at eliminating suspicion from the actual killers. her boyfriend being the next person you see and immediately being thrown in jail as a suspect and then being released because they've got no evidence against him and she receives a call while he's in jail from the killer. It's a really great way of making us divert our attention from him. Also, the eventual reveal that there are two killers, Matthew Lillard being the other, allows you to have the killers be in a scene while someone else is dying and you're like, who is it? Because it's not him, because, you know, it's a really great way that Kevin Williamson found to achieve maximum suspicion for all of the characters and a great sense of disorientation. Speaking of characters, they're all great. Sidney Prescott is, of course, one of the most famous final girls of all time, one of the best horror characters of all time. Neve Campbell is so amazing in this role, but she really did have a huge burden, a massive weight on her as an actress. And it's not just leading a Wes Craven slasher movie. It's that most people who saw this movie were expecting it to be about Drew Barrymore. And it has to cut to her, and they have to not be pissed. And they got to go with it. And she really is terrific in this film. David Arquette as Dewey, instantly likable, and it's kind of a risky character, the sort of bumbling deputy, very Barney Fife in the Andy Griffith Show, but it works great. Courteney Cox as Gale Weathers. This is a character that could easily be played as a villain, but it's such a complex character because it's not just that she believes our hero is wrong that makes you think she's a villain. The fact that she might be right about how Sidney Prescott falsely testified against somebody else. Not like she meant to lie about Cotton Weary, played by Liev Schreiber, but that she just got it wrong. Not only does this allow our protagonist to be imperfect, it allows somebody who is viewed as a villain to have a point. Even super supporting roles like Henry Winkler as the school principal. He gets an incredible scene where he gets to expel these students who are running around in a ghost face mask. Let's talk about the song Red Right Hand by Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. This is a really unique song because it's in Peaky Blinders, it's in Dumb and Dumber, and it's in not just this movie, but the whole Scream franchise loves to use that song. Usually when a song becomes synonymous with a piece of entertainment, it becomes owned by that, and nobody else wants to use it. A lot of Tarantino's movies use songs in very specific ways, and nobody ever wants to touch them again after that. Red Right Hand, though, is that one that's like, yep, it's a Peaky Blinders thing. Oh, sure, it's in Dumb and Dumber. Yeah, it's also in the Scream franchise. It's everywhere. And you know what I really specifically like about the Scream movies? Ghostface is clumsy. This guy falls on his ass all the time. He's definitely the most uncoordinated slasher villain. Also great in this movie, Matthew Lillard. He really feels like he is completely unhinged in this role. And it's not just after his reveal as a killer, it's the whole movie. I will go as far as to say this is a fantastic performance. Because if you look at his motivation as a killer, eventually at the end of the movie you begin to realize that he's not as into it as Sidney's boyfriend. He's kind of just along for the ride. He even says it's just peer pressure. His motive is probably just that. And throughout the whole film, if you look at every action he takes with every single person, you get the sense that he's just kind of doing things. He doesn't really have direction in life, but he also works perfectly if you just want to view him in those moments before you know him as a killer, as the hot-wired crazy friend who just acts like that. Scream launched a franchise that's still going today. In my review of 3, which I did at the beginning of this special, I mentioned that it's the most consistent slasher franchise for me. There is no truly awful Scream movie. There are some that are better than others, of course, but you're not looking at this franchise and finding a Jason Takes Manhattan. None of that exists here. And the first one is still excellent all these years later. Guys, thank you so much, as always, for continuing to watch the 12th annual Halloween special. I'll have more videos coming for you very soon, and if you like this, you can click right here and get Stuckmanized.